Hey folks. Alright, might as well go ahead and get started. I think Alexa's out today. I'm not seeing her. So some of you probably saw in the forums, but this is something we've been talking about for a while, is whether there was a way that we could fit some kind of customization scheme into the Animesh project. The goal is to, let you modify link sets of no mod items, which requires, some kind of special permission or some other alternative structure to allow for that. And unfortunately, it turns out that the scope of that is just more than we had really bargained for Animesh. So we're not going to be tackling that for the initial Animesh release. We we are going to be undertaking it as its own project, sometime in the future. So don't lose hope if it's a feature that you're hoping for. But as far as Animesh goes, we're going to go ahead and get something out the door, sooner rather than later. Not try to tackle that right away. Yeah, well, you never know how these things are going to turn out until you spend the time looking into it. But unfortunately, it did turn out to be a bit out of scope. Um, Tika, this was the discussion of trying to enable customization of no mod items. The idea is like for accessories, like if you wanted to be able to, put a collar on your dog, but you didn't want to have to make the collar and the dog full perm. Trying to come up with some scheme that would let you, link the two together without having to kind of completely give permissions for everything involving the object. So yeah, we've been talking about it for a while, but unfortunately, it's just not going to fit within the scope of the initial Animesh project. So I guess that's the bad news. The good news is that means we should be able to get this thing out the door that much sooner. So since we made the announcement, I've been just trying to work through remaining bugs and trying to get this thing out the door. So we can talk a bit about what else is going on bug wise, if anybody's curious. But that's basically where we are right now, is just trying to get the remaining things sorted out. We have, let's see, what are the remaining major bugs? We have a couple of crashes. Something to do with munging the graphic state when we're switching between animated and non-animated states. So we're going to need to take care of those. We need to finalize the costs, which means that we need to first get any remaining optimizations out of the way, among other things. So, as we've been saying for a while, it's, before we actually release, we have to finalize the land impact and the rendering cost calculations and all that good stuff. So we're going to be, tackling that before release, which, requires us to get the other bits wrapped up and then to do some performance analysis. Um, See, there's a couple of issues with left clicking on Animesh objects, where things don't select correctly. So we need to take a look at those. What else? There's one question about whether LOD is working correctly. To take a look at that. We want to get imposters working. Um, there's a few kind of code cleanup things, and there's one thing that's going to require a change to the baking service. if you put on an animesh attachment, then that can mess up your height calculation, which then can cause your avatar to crouch or something. You can't actually reproduce that bug right now because of another issue with the baking service. So they're sort of canceling out, but it may cause you to find your avatar at the wrong height now. So in any case, we need to get all that stuff sorted. Anchor's looking at some of that stuff now, and I'll be getting into that. Get the calculation correct for when we have animesh attachments. So I don't know. I think those are the big things. There's a few other bits and pieces we need to take a look at. But yeah, other than that, tell us if there's other issues that are causing problems. Definitely raise them and file JIRAs before we get to release. Not out for Christmas? No, I wouldn't think so. Let's see. Lucia asks, is getting impostering working part of that? Yes, that's one of the things we're trying to get sorted out. Let's see. Beck asks about scaling issues. Which scaling issues? Lucia asks about resync animations. What are resync animations? Okay. Beck says the fact that land impact is calculated based on the object scale, but the LED is effective based on the rigged scale, so you can game the cost. Yeah, well, that is the thing. Um, and that is the main reason that right now we have a limit based on triangle counts because it can't be gamed, or at least not that I know of. The At some point we are going to try to fix that, so we probably will want to try to get a fix in for at least Animesh before it releases. Although trying to tackle changes to calculations for existing categories of objects, things that are already around before Animesh, obviously is harder. You can't break stuff that's already out there. You're not going to have a flat land cost when we go live. No, the cost is going to have some component of uh, some component based on the complexity of the model. Um, there may be a component that's flat, right? Like a fixed cost per animesh on top of that, but it would be much smaller than the 200 that we have now. Just to see how that comes out when we do the performance testing. But basically, the intent there is to account for the extra overhead of carrying around a skeleton to do the animations. So yeah, as Cia says, it needs a base impact. I think there will be a base impact, but I think once we crunch the numbers, it's going to be quite a lot lower than what we have now. Okay, we're gonna have an auction now for the right value for the number. We'll go with the largest number anybody says in the next 3 minutes. How about that? Let's see. So, Polysale asks base impact plus triangle count multiplier. Possibly. As we were just saying, there's also the question of whether we're going to try to fix the way that the extents get calculated. The fact that the rigged objects are being treated as if they're unrigged is a problem now for rendering cost, and it's going to be a problem for land impact with Animesh objects. So take a look at that. Yeah, well, a scope creep risk. Yeah, we're not trying to get into the whole question of how to fix rendering costs or land impact in general. That's kind of its own project that has more or less gotten put on hold in the process of working on this. But we'll at least try to make reasonable decisions for Animesh objects in particular, so that we're doing something that we're not going to be like kicking ourselves too much for in the future. Let's see. For the baking system, will it have new LSL commands? Baking, we're not really looking at anything that requires new LSL commands for baking currently. Are you talking about bakes on mesh, or are you talking about the baking changes for Animesh? Oh, baking system on Mesh and Animesh. Yeah, that's the Bakes on Mesh project. Again, that's not part of the initial Animesh release, but the idea is that once we do that, then it would be possible to attach, uh, attach baked textures from your avatar uh, onto your mesh objects, which could include, initially that would include your avatar meshes. Before we could do that for Animeshes, then we would also have to actually do baking for Animeshes. So that would require some additional work. That's probably more like the kind of Animesh Phase 2 stuff before we could do that. So I think when Bakes on Mesh first come out, bakes on it'll be bakes on Mesh avatars, and then once we get a chance to do some additional updates to Animesh itself, then it'll be applied to that as well. We don't really have any plans to do LSL for bakes on mesh. If people have particular reasons why they think they need that, then it might be good to file a JIRA for that. But the way we've been envisioning it is just that inside the build tools you can flag you can flag any given face as being something that would have a baked texture applied to it instead of whatever other texture you've chosen. Yeah, we're not really trying to provide an API for baking to allow people to do arbitrary texture composition. It's really a more limited thing than that, where we're trying to provide hooks to for people to be able to make more extensive use of the baked textures they already have.
Yeah, I mean, if you want a script, I'd be curious to hear how you would actually use it. And, you know, baking is a non-trivial operation, so it's not going to be something you sit there and do in a loop and make a really awesome, cool effect on your avatar.
let's see. Tiger says, I dislike selling things no mod. I like allowing people to customize their textures and animations. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that the later customization project would be designed to address. To give you the ability to have kind of finer grained control, so you can say, okay, this thing can have its texture modified by the ultimate user, but it's not, full perm. You can't like go in and just go nuts and change anything you want about it. But again, we don't know all the details on exactly how it's going to work yet. It's just what we know so far is that it's too big to fit into the Animesh project. Polysale says someone will want to have it run this texture or take the baking service texture instead. I mean, that's basically the goal of what we're talking about doing in the build tools now, is to have a in the texture editing screen for your object, you can specify each face as as a texture the way you do today, or you can say, hey, use the bake texture instead, or use the upper body bake texture. You can pick which one. I mean, everyone can everyone use the build tools? Yeah, I mean, if the object is modified, then you can use build tools to modify it. If not, then you can't. So you'd have a mesh assigned as the head object. Not exactly. I mean, this is per face uh, rather than per object. So you can. Yeah, that would probably be the way you'd normally do it. Is you'd have you know faces that corresponded to different regions of the avatar, and then you'd flag them accordingly and say, okay, this gets the head texture, this gets the upper body texture, whatever. But remember that for the end user, they don't have to use the build tool, right? The idea is that the content creator flags the object as use the bake texture once, and then every time something causes your bake texture to get updated, that that texture on the mesh is going to update, right? So if you put on if you put on a shirt or something, then that triggers a rebake, which triggers an update to your upper body bake texture, which then shows up on your mesh avatar, right? So the idea isn't that everybody who buys something has to be mucking around um, with the settings for bakes on mesh. The idea is you set it once, and then it just works, similarly to the way that the system avatar does today.
That is a great point, Tiger. The fact that our creations will have for Animesh will have to be mod really kind of allows anybody to just grab any of our avatars and just do whatever they want with them.
Your thing, they're going to have to be mod to enable what? This is if you're allowing textures to be customized or whatever.
Or even linking things to them.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the unfortunate part of not being able to fit the customization project into Animesh. We are shooting for having a better solution, but when Animesh first goes live, you will have to make the call on either the customizations are locked out, or the modify perms have to be set.
Well, Tiger's point was that okay, so let's say like for my elephant, what would be the point of me releasing a new elephant if I release the original avatar as mod? Because somebody could just take my elephant, throw in a script, use all the same animations that are in there. So I have, as the creator, I have no real incentive to release an Animesh elephant because anybody could do it to my elephant as it is.
Is your elephant avatar mod currently?
I like to release things mod. Yes, it's probably mod.
I mean, you've already released the elephant av, right?
Yes, but under the current way Animesh works, anybody could take that elephant, res it on the ground, throw in their own script, set the the elephant to Animesh, and right there they have an Animesh elephant doing everything I would do to it.
The point I've been making in chat, Veer, if you haven't been able to follow along, is so for me personally, I really like releasing all of my avatars modifiable. The mesh is modifiable, the animations are modifiable. That way people can change their skins, they can customize their animations, they can link or unlink things to customize, like people turn my horses into dragons, they can do whatever they want to do. And I like giving people that leeway to customize the way that they want. But now, because Animesh is a feature in the build tool instead of in the upload tool, which is actually where I originally thought it would be, I don't feel like as a creator I have incentive to go back through all of my existing avatars and rescript them as like interactive pet horses that will graze on the ground and then you can ride them and pet them or do whatever else. I mean, I can think of all of these features that I would like to give them, but I don't feel incentivized to take the time to do that, to turn it into Animesh pets, because I feel like all of the thousands upon thousands of people who already have my avatars can just click a button, toss in some freebie scripts, replace it with some of the animations that I've already made for those avatars, and they have the semblance of an Animesh pet. So if I spend months and months making all of these new features, new animations to make these cool interactive pets, I feel like there's not enough incentive for that to really pay off for me because people can get something kind of similar, just a little less functional without spending any extra money.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how that's going to work out in practice. I mean, it seems like creating a good pet requires a lot of additional work on top of just creating a mesh avatar. So just even if people can get a hold of an existing avatar and flag it as Animesh, it unless they have, of course they'd have to have copy and modify and transfer permissions before that would be useful, right? They can't actually give it to somebody else until they've got all those permissions. They would have to
No,
have
no, they
copy and
can't.
transfer for the animations, right?
They can't give it to someone else, but if all of my avatars are copy mod, and they are, they could just take, like, say, the freebie scripts that was in the Wandering Raptor and turn my horse avatar into a wandering horse using my horse mesh and my horse walk animation. And sure, it wouldn't have all of the features of the cool pet that I would like to make, but it would be good enough that they could just toss it on their lawn and it will walk around. And like, therefore, I, as a creator, don't really feel incentivized to make all of those cool new features when someone could just bypass it for free. So my thought in that regard was I would actually really like it if Animesh were a feature of the mesh upload tool instead of the edit window. That way I could control what's being done with my existing avatars.
Hmm. Well, I, I'm sure you could make a case, on either side for this. I think that the way we have it set up now is it's most consistent with other permissions. I mean, for example, if you buy a mesh that's or you buy an avatar that's a mesh, the intent is of the seller is probably that it'll be used as a mesh on your avatar. But I mean, if you wanted to res 50 static copies of that and make a giant pyramid of them in your backyard, there isn't really any permission that says you can't do that either. The generally the idea is that if something has modified permissions, then people are allowed to make changes to it and use it in different ways. So I'm not really sure that that Animesh is that different, and I don't just knowing a little bit about human nature, I really don't think that the vast majority of users are going to go to a vast amount of effort to rip out meshes from their avatars just so they can make a bad approximation of a pet for their own use. I mean, people like to have cool stuff. They like to show off their cool stuff. If there's, cool pets or cool domesticated animals or whatever out there that, have much better behaviors and that are really designed as pets, and frankly, our tools aren't that easy to use for building either. I think the vast majority of people, both through a desire to have the nicest things and through simple laziness, are going to, go out and buy these pets, even if it's theoretically possible that they could, rig up their own content manually. Honestly, my suspicion is that would be a pretty small percentage of the total user base that would bother to do that.
The other part about that would be that animeshes have to be drastically scaled back from what an avatar's mesh is. I mean, we have no limits with avatars, so people, you know, customize them with no limits. So it wouldn't be quite the same for an animesh, but the point is still valid, I think.
I think it's easy to look at just sort of the simple testing that people have done so far with Animesh and say, well, okay, it's really easy to go from from a mesh avatar to an Animesh, and in terms of just like setting the flag and tossing in some animations, it is easy. But in terms of getting something that actually works well as an Animesh, I think there's going to be a lot more art to it than that. That you need to know how to design the physics shape and to get things positioned correctly and to get behavioral scripts that actually make sense. I mean, yeah, you can toss the Raptor script in, but it acts kind of goofy if you're using it to animate anything that's not the Raptor. It's really kind of designed for that one particular case. So um, again, I think for the vast majority of users, there's going to be a clear value to having someone else create the content for you, even if it's not something that's explicitly forced on you by the permission system.
Is there much of a reason to not have it as an upload option? Like, what's the real benefit of having it in the build menu instead?
I mean, I think there's a few different things. One, it's most compatible with the way the other settings work. Kind of the expectation is that if something's mod, then people are allowed to modify it. I think it speeds adoption if you make it really easy for people to take existing content and convert it too. I mean, there's probably lots of stuff out there in the world that people have uploaded in the past that they don't remember how they did it. They don't have the source files anymore. If it's a feature in the build tools, then someone who has the permissions can turn that into an Animesh. If it's only an option that can be done on upload, then that content is all effectively dead. You can't repurpose it or reuse it.
But it does kind of bring up a point. Personally for me, I'm all for allowing users to do as much as we can allow them. But maybe some other creators maybe didn't imagine that people could do this type of thing with their creation. So I can understand how some creators might be slightly upset by this.
Well, I think that horse has left the barn, because if I've gone out and bought a nice bento, dance animation, and I've got the ability to, copy it at least, there's nothing stopping me now from taking that and combining it into Animesh stuff, right? That I'm making. So there's going to be bleed in combinations, but I don't think we could stop it, and I don't think we really want to either.
Like I said, I'm not against it. I can just see how certain creators' attitudes, but I guess those creators wouldn't allow mod anyway. So,
Well, kind of my feeling on the matter was that if I did want to sell something as both an Animesh and as an avatar and make those two different products that are what's the word? They're optimized to act as an avatar versus as an Animesh. And people may not want to pay for both of those things. I feel like I'm kind of forced to sell those things no modify to prevent them from trying to do that crossover, which isn't something that I feel comfortable doing. I would much rather allow my things to be modifiable, to allow my customers to customize them how I want without feeling like I'm detracting from my own sales, or without requiring me to charge it for twice as much money as I think it's worth, on the off chance that someone decides that, hey, I'm going to turn this avatar into an Animesh, so that I don't also have to buy the Animesh version of it.
Well, again, I'm not sure that that's something that it's completely reasonable to try to stop people from doing, and I also don't think it's going to kill the marketplace. I think the vast majority of users would rather have nice content that they don't have to mess around with building themselves. And a lot of the people who are going to take the time to kind of disassemble and reassemble things are going to be doing it, especially with things that they don't have the right to transfer. They're going to be doing it because they like tinkering, not because they're trying to save a few bucks.
I would also tend to think that the opposite is possible, in that you might make an avatar and somebody then, that's mod, somebody turns into, say, a horse, that somebody turns into a pet that they can kind of wander around on their own. But then they may look at the horse that they can buy from you that does have all these extra features, and so it might actually end up getting you an extra sale because it was modifiable, where they can turn it into a pet that just kind of wanders around, that doesn't have a lot of features.
yeah, more than likely you're going to actually get more sales from that and with less work. And you'll also get people who get like the inferior version that was a third party change. And they would basically go, no, I want the full thing. So you're actually, it's almost, I just see it as win-win.
It could be, yeah.
I mean, so imagine you don't have to do anything to your avatar. You have people, because a lot of times there's specialty avatars, but people don't want to wear it around, but it'd make it perfect NPC, pet, something else. Then you don't even have to do any work. So, I mean, I can see why people would want to lock things down. I've done it before. But however, it's basically a free market if you let other people do the work for you.
I think that's the interesting part. That by Animesh introduces a whole new like way to use things in Second Life, at least a rigged mesh, which is vastly interesting for a lot of people. And if a coder, all on his own, without even knowing how to do a mesh or anything like that, can write this beautiful code, and they can just stick that in any avatar that's out there and res it on the ground and use the existing animations. I mean, it's an interesting thing that's happening here.
I mean, it's already no copy, so it's still just their use. I mean, you got to think about, you know, um, just I don't know. It's For me, it's not about locking people out. I try and usually when I create stuff to give as much as I can within limitations, but I don't know. It's just I think that the whole mine thing, you know, will is not the right attitude to lean towards helping and giving creativity and doing cool stuff.
But also the point I made earlier is because Animesh is going to work on a scale with triangles, and land impact. Um, we, as the creators of these meshes, we have an incentive to optimize a great mesh for Animesh because people are going to some things people are going to want to use in that way, in big herds or little rats or things like that. So, I mean, there's a part for us to play too.
And I think the kinds of accessory, marketplace, to the extent that we can get that working with Animesh V1, the kinds of things you're going to want to do with Animesh objects there is going to be different than the kinds of things that you're typically going to be doing with avatars as well. There's a lot of differences in kind of behavior and how they interact with objects, and so I certainly don't feel like it's just a case of well, if you've got one then you've got the other, and so there's no there's no incentive there. Strip clubs full of Animesh, yes, I expect so. Yeah, has anybody looked in the adult region recently?
And look at all the LibSL bots and things like that when that stuff came out. I mean, you know, what it really does with Animesh is it gives people an opportunity to quit, actually having avatars to be models and things like that, and just all that other stuff. So therefore, an avatar more than likely will still be an avatar later on down the road versus, potentially a bot and things like that.
I think this whole like optimization thing is just a conspiracy by Linden Lab to get people to walk around naked.
You don't have to do much to get them to do that.
Yeah, this is the only place I've worked where there's a real risk of showing up at a meeting with no clothes on.
I'm
Your
just
avatar
waiting
V.
for.
Veer.
for sorry. Go ahead, Kat.
Oh, I was going to say, Veer, your avatar is already naked.
Oh, geez, somebody noticed.
I was gonna say, I'm just waiting for the creative hentai to come in with the anime mesh.
So, maybe I should say a little more. I saw this little bit of discussion about the notion of, triangle count limits versus just letting the land impact sort it out. I'm not sure that that is going to work the way you expect because, we have some really severe issues with the way that we calculate rendering cost for avatars. And if you don't make the same mistake uh, for an Animesh object, then you may find that something is hundreds of times more expensive than you anticipated if you actually account for it correctly. So it's the I think if once we actually run the numbers on this, you may find that the land impacts for your 2 million poly avatar may be completely prohibitive, even if you don't have a hard triangle count limit. I think the likelihood is that we will wind up having some kind of a triangle count limit ultimately, but even if you don't, you probably shouldn't assume that that's the only thing standing in your way. Because I mean, as I mentioned, we've been doing some work on trying to correct for the accounting, and there literally are models out there where where you're off by a factor of hundreds, and um, it's hard to fix that for content that's already out there, but we're going to try not to have it be too bad for the new stuff that's entering the world.
I got a question for about the cost and stuff. Will, like, say, temporary res still not affect land pack and things like that? Because I can see creative ways just to continually res by the time it times out and replace and move and stuff. Just so people can have things for free.
Mesh already counts as land impact on temp.
How much screaming would there be if someone wasn't sure what the existing temp of mesh stuff is? Cube, you say that doesn't work? I mean, you can't res. Okay, yeah. So if you can't res or have a mesh object temp as temp on res.
Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah, let's do the same for Animesh, because unless there's like a really good argument for doing it, it seems like it'd be worth. See. Oh, it's temp. Oh, I got it. Okay, so it's temp in terms of its existence, but not. It doesn't bypass the accounting. That works.
So what are you thinking as far as a hard limit? I mean, there probably should be a hard limit, but what do you think that number might be?
I don't think we know yet. We've discussed this a certain amount in past meetings. I think a lot of people have been coming out, somewhere between 30K to 100K. But it's not clearly there's not a consensus on that. There's not going to be.
I think we need a good deal
220K
more
limit is
experience.
probably low.
I think we need a good deal more experience with what the effects are before we can really begin making that kind of decision. That's the whole point of the trial period.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying earlier. Is that I know you weren't on the voice for a while there. That's what I was saying earlier. Is that one of the things we're going to be doing before we go to release on this is trying to get better numbers on performance impact to inform our choice of what the ultimate limits are going to be.
And in general, one of the things we've done over the last, several features that we've done is to try to get away from having hard limits and instead just imposing costs, and giving people control over how much things affect them. So if we can find solutions that work that way, then we don't have to create a hard limit, and that gives people a lot more flexibility and a lot more control.
Yeah, I think if we have calculations, again, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, if we have calculations that aren't severely broken for land impact, then we have more freedom to allow land impact to be the determining factor. Given that right now we have some kind of serious calculation problems there, we've got the hard limit in place as well.
Well, I'm
It's
assuming
really hard to arrive upon any single hard limit because what's appropriate for one mesh could be absolutely inappropriate for another, like in the case of the rat versus, say, a horse with a harness and a carriage and a driver. You can't charge you can charge 10K for the rat and 10K for the other is just impossible. So
Right. No, but I mean the cost certainly should be proportional to the complexity, right? So a simple rat costs less than a complicated horse in terms of land impact. But the question is, should there also be kind of a ceiling that the objects kind of never go above?
yeah, that's what I was
in any
just saying.
case.
Is it's hard to arrive at a ceiling because use cases could vary so drastically.
We've got to have some even if it's really, really high, there will be a limit, because when we don't have limits, some of you very creative people will put things up into, whatever number you think of 50,000 or 60,000, yeah, we can go above the normal range, but there will people that will try and make things that take it far beyond that to the millions and so on. Not mentioning Lucia or anybody like that, but it'll cause problems. So there will be some limit, and hopefully it's going to be high enough so that you guys can really go do the good stuff.
I may sound like an old fogey, but back a long time ago, we had to use creative texturing for models and stuff in games and all that other stuff. I think nowadays people are almost too reliant on the actual mesh stuff itself. I'd like to see a combination of the two, really.
Yeah, and I mean that's a good point, and really high quality content does use triangles wisely, not rather than just trying to kind of have one triangle, multiple triangles per pixel or whatever to get the most detail conceivable, which is more work, and it's understandable that if there's content already out there that people are using and they're happy with, that they would like to be able to just adapt it into Animesh. But at the same time, it is a new feature, and the fact that we do have some flexibility in determining the costs means that we're not constrained to necessarily allow everything that somebody has come up with a way to do as being the standard of practice. There are cases where it really doesn't make sense. Please believe me, it really doesn't make sense to have a multi-million triangle avatar, even if you have one and you like it. And we would really like to encourage people to think in terms of kind of upping the game on content efficiency.
So when can we expect a viewer that calculates our Animesh differently?
When we
You mean
ship it.
when are the final cost numbers going to be out? Yeah, that's going to be basically close to when we're doing final release, because
No, I mean
you've got to get the
something.
bug fixes and the performance testing done before we can do that.
No, I mean something besides these arbitrary limits. Something we can, do some testing with.
Well, I mean, the goal is to change it one more time rather than kind of keep tweaking it. If the current values are so restrictive that you fundamentally can't do some of the things you need to do, then maybe we should talk about that. But the intention was that we would start out with some kind of initial values and do testing, figure out what the value really should be, and then change it once. I think it's going to cause a lot of confusion if we're kind of tweaking and raising and lowering every couple of weeks, but until we get up to release.
Just it's worth bearing in mind that while it's great that you can do some early development of uses of a project viewer technology like Animesh during the project viewer phase, the point is not to enable that so much as to enable us to find out whether or not the new viewer feature works and what needs to be done to make it work. So things like setting limits and costs are necessarily one of the very last things we're going to end up doing.
We got to break it first.
Exactly. Focus on
Yeah.
breaking it.
Well, I
Ask and
definitely,
you shall receive.
I definitely understand all that, but when you tell us that something is going to cost so much, it's difficult to create something when you're just walking into it blindly. I mean, the very end product that we create, a shitload of time is going to be spent on this. We can't be the last ones to know what the final numbers are going to. I mean, we have to have some idea.
But
Well,
bear in
sure,
mind
bear in
the
mind this is
the feature's going to be there forever. I mean, it's not that there's no time out here, right? You're going to
this
have
is
all the time
still,
you need.
It is still a project viewer. I mean, we've got all the disclaimers in there about stuff can break. It's possible that everything that people have made to date is going to get clobbered by something and is going to have to be redone. At this stage of the project, I don't think that's super likely, but you always have to consider that as a possibility. There's until it's out and released, there's no guarantee what the final feature is going to look like.
I like that you said that because that doesn't limit y'all on technology and things like that. I'm actually for all breaking stuff and just saying, oops, too bad.
I should answer Polysale, who's been asking for a while about having different triangle counts limits for Warn Animesh versus Resd Animesh. So what would the objective be there? What kinds of differences would you be shooting for with those values? You're trying to have more limits on the Warn and less on the Resd, with the idea that the Resd is going to get charged based on land impact instead. Is that kind of what you're thinking? Yeah. It might be possible. I think it would be a little tricky because, once something's already resed, then turning it into an attachment or whatever or is, kind of a small change. I guess right now there's not an easy way to go the other way. Since you can't drop an attachment into the world. But it would require quite a bit of additional work we're not currently doing. So I don't know if we'd wind up pursuing that sort of thing or not. So there's a question about will an Animesh be able to sit? I don't think you'll be able to sit the way that avatars can sit now, where you're actually changing your parenting. The objects are actually kind of linked in the scene. You could go into a sit pose and you could move your Animesh object, but I'm not sure if that's going to give you all of the features you'd want there. All right, I think we're about at time. Oh, one thing I was hoping that people might have looked at a bit is with the last viewer update, we made it more flexible what you could have in an Animesh link set. So you could have a root prim that's non-mesh that does your physics for you or whatever, and that also kind of gives you an additional hook for being able to adjust positioning. Has anybody had a chance to play with that? Does it seem to be helping, or is that still too new? Oh, okay, cool. Glad to hear it.
I logged in earlier just specifically to play with that with the elephant, but I didn't have enough time.
Yeah.
I will.
Okay, well, feel free to give a shout whenever you find some more stuff out. Okay, so I guess we're at time. We will not be meeting next week because of the Thanksgiving holiday. And then I believe we do have a meeting the following week, which would be the 30th. Yeah. So see everybody in 2 weeks. And if you're in the States, have a good holiday.
Great. Thanks, Fear. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Yep. You too. Talk to you later.